Tonight, from fake promises to fake patients, claims that a hospital stacked the ward full of fake patients for a minister's visit. Plus, 2 more wind farm projects face fierce protests. I'll talk to a local community leader who claims they're being snowed with fake photos of how these wind towers will actually look. Also tonight, democracy under attack. I'll speak to a local councillor elected who is banned by other councillors from doing a job, and without them saying why. And across to Washington for an amazing court case to silence Mark Steyn, the Conservative commentator who dared to say that the most influential global warming graphic in the world, the infamous hockey stick that scared the world, is actually a fraud. So a packed show, including Barnaby Joyce and, of course, my whiskey of the week. But first, a story incredible that shows how easy it is to fool the ABC and whip up a mob to hate Israel and Jews. So easily is this done that it makes me wonder what kind of people fall for this. Last October, 2 men were filmed on CCTV burning a hamburger outlet called Burgatory in Melbourne's Caulfield, a very Jewish area. Now, this store was owned by Taya, who's a Palestinian Australian who's been attacking Israel in protests.
From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
Now, police very quickly said, hang on, there's actually no evidence this store was burned by angry Jews. But the Free Palestine Melbourne group organised the protest at a local park near the shop and right opposite a synagogue. It said, the demonstrators reiterate that the arson attack on Burgatory was a hate crime, and some there shouted insults and threats at Jews outside that synagogue. At least one protester was arrested and the synagogue evacuated. Jews in Caulfield later reported being attacked. Now, like I said, police from the start, even before 2 arrests yesterday, and I'll show you them later, police said they were sure this arson attack on that shop was not a religious or political crime. But Taya told a mob of protesters in Melbourne he was a martyr being intimidated for opposing Israel.
In the past weeks, as I advocated for peace and an immediate ceasefire and the rights of the Palestinian people, my own establishment, Burgatory in Caulfield, became a target. Staff threatened and harassed, all in an attempt to silence my support. The other day, in a cruel act of arson, our store was reduced to ashes. To those who sought to silence us with hate and violence, I say, you will not succeed.
A supporter also placed the GoFundMe appeal saying, Taya is an Australian Palestinian subjected to a hate crime. He'd been a vocal supporter for peace and a ceasefire in Palestine-Israel and has recently been subjected to numerous threats, abuse and harassment. Now, this appeal to rebuild his burger shop raised $63,000. And the ABC seemed so impressed by this story of poor Taya that it selected him to ask a question on Q&A, broadcast around the country, again posing as a victim of a hate crime.
I'm a proud Australian Palestinian, an entrepreneur and the owner of Burgatory, which burned down on Friday morning. I practiced my right to protest against the genocide that's happening in Gaza, a term Francesca Albanese said Israel is at risk of. The politicians and the media have polarised society in this country. The media was weaponised against me and other pro-Palestinian protesters for standing up against an injustice.
Well, prominent leftists on Twitter, like former Sydney Morning Herald columnist Mike Carlton and former Channel 10 political editor Paul Bongiorno, both of the abusive left, seem to buy this story of Taya the martyr. But plot twist for the ABC and the left. Like I say, 2 men were arrested yesterday for allegedly burning down, for burning down Taya's shop for reasons we haven't been told. No evidence that they are Jewish activists or pro-Israel extremists. In fact, the head of the investigation said it again. We know this incident was not a hate crime. It wasn't motivated by prejudice or politics, as they said from the start. So why? Why did the organisers of the anti-Israel protests in Melbourne invite Taya to speak as if he really was the victim of bigotry? Why did the ABC give him a platform? Agendas. Agendas. And this agenda seems to me to rely an awful lot on conspiracy theories, misinformation, and lies. I've covered here on the Bolt Report so many protests against these massive wind farms the Albanese government wants to build all over our landscape, plus the thousands of kilometres of huge transmission wires to hook them all up. But now there are 2 more community protests. The revolt really is expanding. Let me start with the one against the wind farm with 33 turbines, 1/4 of a kilometre tall, that's planned for Victoria's beautiful Strzelecki Ranges. This is how they are supposed to look when they are built, at least according to the developers of this Delburn wind farm. Driving through Victoria over Christmas, by the way, and seeing so many wind turbines already on hills and rises, absolutely dominating the landscape like it was an industrial park, I was outraged by vandalism like this. And some opponents claim, well, look, there's also a fire risk of having all these turbines out in the bush, all the wires to connect them, and it's true they have caused some fires. Although wind farm operators say that the risk is actually very small. But for me, really, it's about the sheer ugliness and the massive costs of having all this. But whatever the reasons for fighting these monstrosities, so many protest groups tell me they are feeling bulldozed by politicians and bureaucrats with a green light in their eyes. Joining me is Gabrielle Armstrong. She's Secretary of the Strzelecki Community Alliance that's fighting this Delburn wind farm. Gabrielle Armstrong, thank you so much for joining me. What is wrong with these towers, 1/4 of a kilometre tall?
Yes, they're offshore-sized turbines. They are 1/4 of a kilometre high. Their rotation diameter is 180 metres, which will overhang the playing field of the MCG. They're located on top of land, which has an extensive history of catastrophic bushfires. And it's situated in a densely populated area with over 6,000 residents within 5 kilometres of any one turbine.
You know, I've seen the photos. I mean, I've shown people the photos, obviously, in introducing you, and that's a 3D. You know, that's a sort of mock-up of what they will look like. I can't believe how dominating the beautiful landscape they are. I mean, they're on top of hills. You could see them for miles and miles away. I mean, it's hideous.
The mock-ups that are produced by the developers from our visual reports are underestimated. We can judge by the size of the met mast that's up that they're going to be absolutely obscene on the horizon. And we've got homes that are as close as 1,010 metres from these turbines. So you can imagine how devastated the community is.
So when I show their mock-up of what they produced to show you what they would look like when they're built, you're telling me it's actually worse than that. They're going to look much taller than that.
Oh, absolutely. We've done comparisons between the height of the met mast and the visual pictures that were presented at the panel report, and the turbine size as they put them up is significantly lower than what the met mast is, and it is the height of the nacelle or the centre of the turbine. So we know that they're going to be at least another 90 metres taller than that.
Oh, hello. What, some trickery going on here. How many locals are against what's being built there?
Submissions to the panel, the panel received over 700 submissions, which for a wind farm is a huge number. Overwhelmingly, this community is very, very against this development.
But Gabrielle, what response have you had?
Look, we've begun raising concerns from the very beginning once we realised the scope of this development. We've had concerns about bushfire, noise, the visual impact, aviation impact, the impact on flora and fauna. We've raised those with both the government and with our local council, and despite the planning panel acknowledging that there will be significant adverse effects on the community, the Minister for Planning has just said, no problem, it's going to be approved. So the communities remain strong throughout. We are objecting to this profoundly inappropriately sited wind farm.
Look, for me, the number one issue is that damn ugly. I like to feel when I'm in the bush that I'm away from industrial development. I don't like the landscape being turned into essentially a wind industry. You didn't mention the visual amenity. You mentioned, though, the fire risk twice. Now, I keep getting told, oh, well, the fire risk isn't that great, although we have had reports of wind farms, the wind generators sparking up, causing fire, even a couple of bushfires. What do you know about the risk?
Well, the risk in the area is very concerning to start with. We had a report done by David Packham, who is very qualified in the area, and identified the Strzelecki Ranges as second only to the Dandenong Ranges as far as volatility and fuel load. We are unsure as to how aerial water bombing will happen. There's lots of issues with the turbulence created by wind turbines, even in their position of being in the Y position, they call it, where they're still. There's a cumulative turbulence that happens. We don't know whether the aerial fire response will be available. And with turbines of 250 metres above the ground, flying above those, we don't believe that the aerial bombing will be effective anyway, because they come down so low, and they were only metres above homes when they worked through the Delburn complex fires, and we just don't know whether it'll be effective. It's too much of a risk. It's as simple as that, too much of a risk.
Well, Gabrielle, for me, it's really the monstrosity of having these things littering our landscape, but the fire risk, I can imagine that would upset you as well. Gabrielle Armstrong, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now,
remember, with all these wind factories, really, under the Albanese government's plans, for every wind tower that you already see, right, up on a hill somewhere, dominating the landscape, we are going to see 9 more before they're finished. 9 more. Now, I doubt Australians are going to accept this destruction of their landscape. And today, in fact, there was yet another protest, this time at Nundle, near Tamworth. Again, lovely landscape, but this is what it'll look like once the wind generators are built. And the local member there is Barnaby Joyce, the Nationals MP and former Deputy Prime Minister, who joins us every Thursday. Barnaby Joyce, I mean, seriously. Now it's coming to you, mate. What's happened to your big fight against these monstrosities?
Well, on the 6th of February, that's Tuesday the 6th at 10 a.m, we'll be on the front lawns of Parliament House, the Reckless Renewables rally, which I've been working with this group for quite a long while. And we're saying to the people, just like to the lovely lady you were just speaking there about the Strzelecki issues, get yourself to Canberra, because they don't listen to you jumping up and down in your local hall. They're going to listen to you when you're jumping up and down on the front lawns. And that's where you've got to get to. You're dead right. I mean, I've been calling them wind factories now for quite a while. They're not farms. Farms grow carrots, peas, spuds. These are industrial wind farms, wind factories. And it's a great rort, ladies and gentlemen. There's a deemed rate of return that the people who put the wind towers in get, make 18%. They borrow the money at 4.5%. It's secret, so you can't see it. And so they make money whether it produces power or not. And that's why you've got all these overseas companies, Chinese companies, Dutch companies, French companies. And the stupid bunnies who pay for this is you in your power bill. That's why power bill's going through the roof. Now, it's not an environmental solution. This is an environmental catastrophe. One tower, 1 year, kills 1 raptor. So wedge-tailed eagles, hawks, those things that are around here, because I'll have them all around the ranges around here, they're going to be killing animals. That is not an environmental solution. Offshore, they'd completely changed the dynamics of Port Stephens, Illawarra, and now we see down the Strzelecki's. But it's up to you. You've got to get motivated. The Greens are motivated when they want things, and even on this debate, we have Bob Brown who was on our side. So get yourself to Canberra and be heard, because if you're not heard, you're going to get run over. And the only one who's going to be laughing will be a real estate company in Hong Kong or, yeah.
Oh, you offered the delicious prospect of you and Bob Brown together joining forces against these monstrosities, these bird-killing, landscape-wrecking, money-churning monstrosities. Look, send an invitation to him, see what he says.
Absolute swindles.
But Barnaby...
We have, and
we are now
someone
paying...
from his group to turn up. We have.
Well, look, I think it's worth a long shot. Barnaby Joyce and Bob Brown together, that's worth that's a million photographs right there. Barnaby, we're now paying, talk about this electricity system, right? With this green revolution, we're now paying 20% more for electricity. For a system that now needs to actually pay us or disconnect us to make us use less when it runs out, which it seems to be doing an awful lot. I mean, Queensland's state-owned power grid, in the first 2 months of this summer, turned down almost 170,000 air conditioners. People who've got their air conditioners on because of the heat, suddenly cut. It's cut. They've done it 6 times, cut their power to this, or turned them down to protect the electricity network. That's under a Peak Smart program where people get a discount if they, let some remote operator turn down their aircon when demand is too high. This is our future, isn't it?
Well, we've done this to ourselves. I mean, it's a cult. It's a cult that sits behind the so-called energy plan, the 80% renewables by 2030. It is mad. It's like training your horse to eat rocks. You just about got it broken in and it dies of starvation. It just doesn't work. Physics wins every time. You can't keep turning off your power plants and think you're going to have power. You should always make sure that your replacement is up and running first. And if you don't want zero emissions, there's only one way to go. It's nuclear. And you have to get the nuclear plants working online, and then you can start turning down or turning off your coal-fired power plants. But if you just go and shut down your coal-fired power plants and you haven't got anything to replace them with, and you think renewables are going to do it, then the solution, what the outcome is blackouts, brownouts, all your manufacturing leaving, basically a complete cluster.
Honestly, it's the country's it's like jumping out of an aeroplane thinking we'll get a parachute on the way down. That's what we're doing. Barnaby,
we'll develop a parachute on the way to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. It's coming awfully close though, Barnaby. The Albanese government thinks it's getting away. I reckon they're getting away with breaking their promise to deliver the Stage 3 tax cuts in full. Clearly broken promise. Ripping half of their promised cuts off people on more than $146,000 a year. Now the government's under pressure to break even more promises. You got former ACTU Secretary Bill Kelty wanting negative gearing and tax breaks for asset owners now wound back. And who can believe, this is the problem the government's caused, who can believe the government's claims that it's not thinking of breaking all those other promises not to touch these things yet? Have a look.
Do you mind repeating after me this morning, there will be no changes to negative gearing under our government?
We have no plans to do that, Carl. We don't. We've got a full tax reform.
It's not what I asked. Would you mind repeating after me? There will be no changes to negative gearing under my government.
Well, it's not my government, it's the Albanese government, and we have no plans on negative gearing.
Excuse me, Barnaby, but I'm not going to take that answer to the bank.
No, good luck with that one. We've got no plans to break into your house at this stage. You are safe. It just doesn't cut it.
I don't get it.
We've got no plans to hit you over the head with a rock at this point in time. Don't know. But see, they've done it to themselves. They promised $275. Yeah, but they're not. They're not. People want them. We've had this discussion before. Remember, I said the voice wouldn't get up and everyone was wrong. They're not getting away with this. See, people are calling the $275 lie. We're going to reduce your power price by $275 and went through the roof. And then the Stage 3 tax cuts. My word is my bond. Anthony Albanese, but he just kicked that one out the door. And he said, it wasn't such a serious promise. And now they're saying, we're going to make another promise, and this time we're serious. And people go, mate, I'm sorry, I don't believe anything you say anymore. It's just garbage. Just stop making promises because your promises don't matter. If they had really believed that there was a virtue in other people being helped, they should have honoured their promise, as they said they were going to, and then come forward with further legislation to help the people that they believe need helping. That's what an honourable person would do. A dishonourable person says, well, I know I was going to pay you $1,000, but I met this person down the street, so I'm going to pay you $550, okay? You go, no, it was $1,000. You go, well, I know, but things change, circumstances change. I met this person down the street and it doesn't work.
Well, let us see. I mean, you know, a lot of politicians have thought a fistful of dollars is enough to make people blind to where it's coming from and what promises were made. We shall see. It's a moral test of the nation. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time. After the break, the opposition warns Foreign Minister Penny Wong she might have to resign for helping to fund an aid group employing terrorists and terror supporters, ignoring all the warnings. Now, Wong responded this afternoon. But I'll have a former Labor MP come on to call her out after new information shows this scandal is even worse than we thought. Let's fact check Penny Wong today, the Foreign Minister, because we need to fact check her response today to criticism, even a call from the Liberals that she might have to quit for funding an organisation that employed Palestinian terrorists. Now, here are the question Penny Wong faces, a couple of them. Why did she double our funding of a United Nations Agency for Palestinian so-called refugees that hired Palestinian teachers who we have known for years have preached terrorism to their students? Why did she 2 weeks ago give this same organisation, UNRWA, another $6 million on top of that $20 million, when there was evidence that this organisation was paying teachers who were praising the terrorist attack on Israel on October 7 that started this war, the slaughter of 1,200 Jews, the rapes, the kidnappings. And now UNRWA has had to sack 9 of its staff, investigating a couple of more after being given evidence that they joined in that killing and the kidnappings. And the opposition leader today was saying, well, look, Wong might have to quit.
I believe that Penny Wong's position is untenable if it's demonstrated that she had advice that this money could be used for a purpose that wasn't intended by the government.
But all Wong has done so far after the latest news is paused our funding of UNRWA temporarily, she says. But today she made clear she'd like to actually keep sending this corrupted body more of your money. And soon, even after reports that Israel now has shown the US evidence that about 1,200 UNRWA employees, more than 1,000, are actually members of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorist groups that even now are holding Jewish hostages.
It is the only organisation which delivers the sort of assistance and substantive support into the occupied Palestinian territories within the international system. So that is the reality. Can I also remind people what is happening in Gaza at the moment? We have reports from the UN that 400,000 Palestinians in Gaza are actually starving.
Joining me is Michael Danby, a former federal Labor MP. Michael Danby, thank you for joining me. First, before I fact-check that last claim by Penny Wong, how compromised is this UNRWA that she wants to fund again?
Utterly infiltrated and corrupted. Anyone who sees the testimony before the US Congress today, Penny, you ought to get your DFAT advisors at least to look at that. It's an organisation that's irredeemable. In the meantime, aid has to be got into deserving Palestinians, but if we want to end the process of fanaticisation and if we want to have a solution between the two people, there's got to be a different way of managing the Palestinian aid from the UN. It should be done like all other refugees from the UNHCR, a reputable organisation whose hierarchy can't be intimidated because it's all over the world. So it's not just in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank.
Yeah, well, that's the point about this UNRWA that's devoted purely for Palestinians, so-called refugees, but also it employs, if the Israelis are to be believed, 1,200 people who are actually members of two of the terrorist groups behind this war, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, but she says we still need to fund UNRWA because Palestinians are starving and only UNRWA can get the aid to them. That's not correct, is it? You mentioned the United Nations refugee group, but they could do this.
Well, UNHCR is a reputable organisation that works in every country on earth. In the meantime, the World Food Programme and other UN agencies are there. I don't think UNRWA can be disbanded straight away, but if we want a long-term solution between the two people, Penny Wong and people like her, the Oxfam whingers who are on the ABC, putting one-sided point of view about UNRWA, have to look at the burning ship. And UNRWA is a ship that has associated itself with the Hamas attacks, has got so many double members of Hamas and UNRWA. The Israelis are going to be in charge, at least in security, after the war is over there, and they're simply not going to trust UNRWA. Why did young men come and rape women and disfigure their genitals and all of the horrible things we know about, Andrew? Because they had 75 years of fanaticisation by an organisation which taught them that they're not going to be like normal refugees and adjust to life in the country that they live in, i.e. Gaza or the West Bank. They're going to return. So it's an organisation, temporary organisation, created 75 years ago that has enhanced this process of the conflict. And if people are sincere about ending the conflict, they have to have another look at UNRWA. I'm telling you, if Sweden has pulled the pin on them financially, then UNRWA is in a lot of trouble.
But Michael, you must be so disappointed as a long-time Labor MP and member about what your party now in government is doing here, because there are also reports today that Penny Wong is behind a go slow on processing requests from Israel to get some of our military equipment or components. Now, the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, today didn't exactly deny this.
There are no exports of weapons from Australia to Israel and have been for many, many years. Australia's defence export control regime is one which is thorough and detailed as it applies to defence exports or dual-use items to anywhere in the world. And in short, the application of that process takes time. So
I guess from that is saying there is a delay, but it's normal. What do you make of that?
Rubbish. Poor Richard is a minority in a socialist left-dominated government. We've got the farcical situation. Yesterday we've been Packham at the Australians revealing that the Israelis are selling us Iron Fist, which is an anti-drone defence technology, but we won't even sell them defensive stuff because of this war period. Now, it may be that all countries, they go slow on dealing with them during military conflicts, but there's a pattern here, Andrew, the withdrawal of the recognition of West Jerusalem, the giving of loads of taxpayers' money, $200 million, the Adelaide Advertiser says, since over the last 20 years to that crooked organisation UNRWA, where 12 of them participated in the attacks. As you said, 1,300 are double members of Hamas and UNRWA. And Hillel Neuer from the UN Watch says that 3,000 of them participated in a Telegram group that supported the attack on October 7. What an outfit.
I don't know, our record now of supporting democratic allies under attack from Russia, Iran and terrorists backed by Iran is so hopeless now. The issues I've mentioned to you, the fact that we'd rather bury 45 Taipan helicopters than give them to Ukraine, which is begging for them to defend itself against Russia, and the fact that we couldn't even send a single ship. What did we send? About a dozen, 15 people, just that, to protect shipping that's under attack by Iranian-backed rebels in the Red Sea. I mean, the whole thing, it's just disgraceful.
It's a socialist left government. You never expect this of Kim Beazley, Bob Hawke or Paul Keating or Bill Shorten. It's a different world, and the ABC and the government's boosters will not report it.
Well, the time might come when you're going to tear up your Labor Party membership right here live on TV. But Michael Danby, thank you so much for your time.
Loyal to the tribe, always.
Now, after the break, I'm going to cross to the trial of the century. There should have been much more in the papers about this. It's a trial for people who want the freedom to call out global warming scaremongering. Mark Steyn is fighting for his right to call out the most influential graphic from the global warming movement. He wants to call it a fake. He's being sued for millions. Into the trial of the century when it comes to calling out global warming scaremongers. No single graph has done more to launch this scare, this global warming scare, than the infamous hockey stick produced 25 years ago by Professor Michael Mann, claiming to show the world's temperature slowly declining for most of the past 1,000 years until, bang, wicked humans started pumping all that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere with their fossil fuels, and look at that warming go. And it was terrifying. That graphic appeared everywhere. Newspapers, scientific reports of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Panic. But it was weird. If you believe this graph, there's no indication of a medieval warming period where Greenland, for instance, was settled and farmed by Vikings. There was no little ice age really after that either, when the Thames in London froze over. Well, 12 years ago, the Conservative broadcaster and blogger Mark Steyn, who's been a guest long ago on this show, called that graph a fraud. He said man had reconstructed the temperature centuries ago, incorrectly, relying on really weird proxy measures like tree rings in some California bristle cones and just one cedar from the Gasper Peninsula for the years up to 1421. Thin stuff. Man sued Steyn. He once also threatened to sue me until I showed him up. But he sued Steyn 12 years ago. And this case has dragged on and on and on like something in a Dickens novel. Mark Steyn put it well in a speech about this endless case in 2015.
It's the most important free speech case in half a century. I called his hockey stick fraudulent. I've described it as fraudulent since the year 2001 in the National Post of Canada, in Australia's national newspaper, The Australian, in the United Kingdom's biggest selling broadsheet, The Telegraph, probably a lot of other newspapers around the world, all the way to Hawke's Bay Today in New Zealand.
And now, after 12 years, this case has reached the court in Washington, D.C., liberal capital of the world, small l. Steyn is being bled dry by this ongoing legal case. Recently had a heart attack that's put him in a wheelchair. Is representing himself against Mann, who's now the distinguished professor of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Pennsylvania. I should add that distinguished professor is actually part of his title, because others would actually disagree as distinguished at all, apart from his bullying. That's just the difference of opinion that I expressed there. And a lot rides on this, like $20 million potentially. Covering the case is conservative filmmaker Phelan McAleer, another former guest of this show. Phelan McAleer joined me a little while ago. Phelan McAleer, thank you so much for joining me. What has happened so far in this trial? What is Mark Steyn's argument?
Well, you've got the big free speech argument, but actually, he did talk about that in his opening speech to the jury. He's representing himself. But actually, his argument is everything I said is true. The hockey stick is a fraud. That it says flat temperature, big rise recently, that's a fraud. But also that Michael Mann is a fraud. Michael Mann, Professor Michael Mann, who falsely claimed 3 times in his filings to the court to have won a Nobel Prize. This is the supreme irony of this case. Michael Mann claims his reputation has been damaged. The emails and the false claims that are coming out from Michael Mann make you wonder, does he really have a reputation?
Of course, Michael Mann he didn't get the Nobel Prize. It was given to the IPCC, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he was just one of the many, 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 many people in that group of people that were collectively awarded. But what is Michael Mann's case? Because that just wrapped up today.
Michael Mann is saying my reputation was slandered. I was defamed. I got a mean look in aisle 9 of the local supermarket. As one of the, I got 2 nasty emails from someone called Mustafa Overlord at gmail.com. I kid you not. That is the damage that was done to him. He is saying that, but that is one. And I think the judge is very, very interested. Michael Mann has been unable to produce any real serious damage that these 2 articles allegedly did to him. I mean, his career has just gone up. Mark Steyn showed it. He's met Leonardo DiCaprio. He's written book after book. He's pictured with Bill Clinton, and he was at the Sundance Film Festival, and Al Gore. I mean, some people wouldn't look upon that as a great way to spend your life, but he does. And that's one of the big issues: is how were you damaged, Michael Mann?
Absolutely. His title now is Honorary Professor. I mean, distinguished professor. I mean, for goodness sake, distinguished professor, turn it up. But how come it's taken 12 years for this case to actually start?
Well, I think Mark Steyn made the point. The process is the punishment. So Michael Mann has been dragging it out. The DC justice system doesn't help either. But yeah, Michael Mann has not been expeditious. Part of it is the process is the punishment, and it came out a day or so in the trial. Michael Mann is not paying 1 penny of his own legal fees.
But listen, following your excellent accounts of what's been going on in this trial, it's gone on for about a couple of weeks. Michael Mann's presentation's finished now. I can't see how he could win, but the big thing is this is in front of a Washington, D.C. jury. What do you think they're making of this?
Funny, they're very, very good at keeping a poker face. You're always looking at them. They were very impressed by a witness today for Mark Steyn. They laughed at his jokes. They laugh at some of Mark's jokes, not all of them. He plays an Englishman in the court of King Joe Biden, kind of reverse Yankee in the court of King Arthur. He plays that. Look, it's a DC jury. East Coast metropolitan juries have not been very nice to conservatives in the last few months in America. And Michael Mann's lawyers are keep throwing words in. Mark Steyn, who has worked for Fox News, Mark Steyn, who has done this, Mark Steyn, who was guest hosted Rush Limbaugh, Mark Steyn, who murders children. I don't know. They would throw it in every piece of blue meat for the jury that is 98% Democrats, because we live in DC.
I don't know, Phelim. I'm guessing that every time they mentioned Fox News, some of the jury crossed themselves or waved garlic at Mark Steyn. I don't know. But what are the stakes here? What is Michael Mann actually after, and what happens if he succeeds?
Well, interestingly, he hasn't said how much he's after, but it sneaked out the other day, but was immediately quashed by the judge. We believe he's looking for $20 million. As you say, he's gone up and up. He went from Penn State, which is a very prestigious university in the United States. He now works for the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League, UPenn, an Ivy League university. I think that's the judge, and the judge got submissions from Steyn and his co-defendant today, and that was a big issue, and the judge got very, very interested in it, and he said, I'm sending you now home to do your homework. Explain to me what the damages are and how we are supposed to know what the damages are, because you haven't explained and you haven't given any evidence to show actual damage. And in America, that is a key part of defamation. You have to prove malice, you have to prove the facts were wrong, but you also have to prove damage.
Well, I should, in fairness, say that Michael Mann strongly denies any fraudulent trickery with his hockey stick and all that. It's come under quite some serious criticism, but he says he did everything ridgy-didge and and all that. But I have to also say that his attempt to cow me into silence about him, I thought was not the act of a scientist, it was the act of a bully. That's my personal impression. He might see it differently, but I very much hope he loses. Phelan McAleer, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to come on.
You know, going back to what Michael Danby was saying, we are so weak now, don't you think? I mean, just quickly before the break, let me just show you something. The Ukrainian army yesterday used a swarm of drones backed by artillery and anti-tank missiles, a swarm of drones to annihilate a Russian column of military vehicles in the Donetsk region. They killed 3 tanks, an infantry fighting vehicle and several armoured personnel carriers. That's a big haul in a day and done really cheaply. I mean, these drones come in various sizes and shapes, of course, but they can actually be piloted by people with not much more than the skills of a Game Boy player. Now, everyone looking at the Ukraine war, everyone looking at how Houthi rebels now in Yemen, who knew about Yemen, you know, were using drones to attack ships in the Red Sea. Everyone can see that these are weapons not of the future, but of right now. And you know how many attack drones our army has? 0. Do you know how many defence systems it has against drone attacks? 0. No wonder Peter Lay, the former head of our army, can't believe this.
Just got to get off our arse and do something about this.
Absolutely. After the break, the dam has burst. Now Anthony Albanese, under pressure from Labor heavies, to break even more of his promises. Can you believe it? Plus, the elected councillor banned by other councillors from doing her job. And my whiskey of the week. Is anything real anymore? The Victorian Labor government now, it's investigating claims that up to 10 staff and visitors at a country hospital posed as urgent care patients during a visit by the Health Minister, Mary-Ann Thomas. This is one of the official photos of the visit, showing the Minister at a hospital bedside, none of the fake patients to be seen. She insists she had no idea.
If these allegations prove to be true, this is a very significant breach of trust that has been perpetrated by some in the health service, and I certainly would take a very dim view of any employees or others who have been involved in this.
Perhaps so many Labor politicians, by the way, are wearing akubras. I might have something to say about that. Joining me is Louise Elliott, business consultant, Hobart City Councillor, and James McPherson of the Late Debate here on Sky News at 10 tonight, for instance. James, is anything real now? We've got fake promises, we've got fake patients, we've got AI generating fake people, fake Aborigines like Bruce Pascoe. Fake.
Well, I'll tell you what was real, and that was the booze for Anthony Albanese at the tennis. That was very real. But you could add to your list of fake things. Let's add Sports Illustrated cover girls. More often than not, they turn out to be men these days. We could add United Nations relief agencies. Turns out most of those are fronts for Hamas, and on it goes. But this is a bizarre story. I mean, you've got to hand it to these hospital staff. By getting staff to behave as patients, they create the impression that they are, one, understaffed, and B, overworked. So it's a pretty smart way to try and get more funding. But I would have thought the Victorian Health Minister was used to playing pretend at hospitals. After all, doesn't Victoria have 4,000 imaginary ICU beds provided by Daniel Andrews?
Oh, yes. Yes, it did indeed. All those machines that it hired and said, oh, we're going to run out, and never used. And oh, my gosh. But Louise, something that shocked me. You were elected to represent ratepayers of Hobart, but I understand a Code of Conduct panel has suspended you, but there's no reason given as to why. Your colleagues won't say why. What's going on? What did you do?
So the reason it's confidential is because I've appealed the decision. I'm taking it to the court because, in my opinion, when I saw the determination report, I thought that's blatantly wrong and unfair. So I'm taking the matter higher. So that's the reason it's not confidential. But what I can say, that's the reason it is confidential. But what I can say is that this is part of a growing trend where councillors at the local government level are seen as easy targets, and the noose is getting tighter and tighter around local councillors' necks in terms of what they can and can't say. It's really concerning. It's happening all across Australia. And it's really worrying in terms of free speech and democracy because, local councillors are elected to represent their community, not to comply with the latest woke mantra.
Yeah, but James, this is fundamentally undemocratic. I think it's about the third such case I've heard of councillors being stopped from doing their job, silenced, forced to go re-education programs. You know, this can't go on. I mean, this is anti-democratic. Louise was elected by ratepayers, and they are the ones that should determine whether she sits in Parliament or not, or in the council or not, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one silver lining in this cloud is I'm pretty sure the Hobart Council have guaranteed that Louise will be re-elected, as she should be, because anyone with half a brain in Tasmania will realise what is happening and make sure they vote for her next time she's up for election.
Hey, Louise, tonight Powerball offering its record jackpot, $200 million. It's enough to make some pensioner super rich. Well, the thing I think of when I see these figures, $200 million, that's how much Australians have actually handed over to Powerball to buy some hope. There's an awful lot of hope they're buying.
It is an awful lot of hope, but I'm the first to admit I've got my ticket. So in about an hour's time, you won't see me for dust when my winning numbers come up. But in terms of, it's a heap of money. It's absolutely life-changing, and I know what I'd be doing with it. I'd, make sure that all your loved ones are safe and sound, and I would be donating a lot of it because there's no way one person needs that much money.
Well, I don't know. Some people seem to think so. Oh, quickly, James, I mentioned that a Kubra-wearing Labor politician. I've actually spotted this new fashion accessory. For years, we had the high-vis jacket, especially with Victorian Labor politicians, show they're building for the future. But Albanese now has swapped that for a Kubra, which got another workout this week. The other people around didn't see the need headwear, but hats on for Albo. The Bushman from Balmain. It's been going on for more than a year now. What do you think the signal is being sent?
Well, if there's anyone you can trust in this country, you can trust a farmer, you can trust a man of the land. And so I think Albanese's hoping that if he puts a hat on, he'll suddenly appear trustworthy. But I don't think Australians are quite that stupid, Andrew.
But it's strange, isn't it? Hat on? I'm from the bush. Hat off? Actually, I'm from Balmain. Do you think? I wonder whether voters actually will accept that. No. Louise Elliott, James McPherson, thank you both for your time. And take it from me. You remember I had the bookseller on last night being picked on for saying, we want more positive books, male heroes, all that kind of stuff. So I would like to recommend a book that you can then order on robinsonsbooks.com.au so she doesn't get monstered, she gets a reward. And the book, I think, is one that I've been sending around to a number of at Christmas, a long-time favourite of mine, The Leopard by Giuseppe Lampedusa. One thing I love about this, he decided to write his first novel at 58 years of age because one of his cousins got a poetry prize and he thought, if that donkey can get a prize, I can write a book. So he did. Brilliant. And the film is just as good. The film is brilliant. 2 lines from this. Novels can teach you stuff. One is the prince, who's the hero here, is asked to go to Rome to represent the good people of Sicily because the new Italian regime wants to improve those Sicilians, always so dirty and poor and downtrodden, and got to lift them up. And he said, not going to work. I'm not going to play ball. They're coming to teach us good manners, but they won't succeed because we are gods. And if you think about that, that is one of the problems with trying to fix Aboriginal disadvantage. We're trying to impose standards that a lot of Aborigines think, well, I'm perfectly well and happy here, thank you very much, up in the Northern Territory, whatever. And the other thing he said, for things to stay the same, everything must change. You can't be a reactionary to be a conservative. The Leopard by Lampedusa. Go to Robinson's online. And my whiskey of the week is a French one. Do you know, the United States is the biggest buyer of whiskey, so big. France is number 2. Did you know that? Beats even Britain, for instance. And the reason I like this one, it's from the west of France, east of France. It's from bourbon casks, really smoky peat, a little bit smoky, but not too much. It's elegant, like French You imagine a French whiskey? This is it. Might be for you, might be even for the ladies, if you like your whiskey smoky. Beautiful. Anyway, so that is my tip. Roseleurs, and this is the Whiskey Lorraine and the Tourbe collection. That's it from me. Coming up next, Sherry Markson. Good night.